Hey, juniors and families. This is Mr. Reem, and it might be a while since we've seen each other. And I want to just totally start off the bat and say that's been a huge bummer for everybody. It's something that we definitely at school have missed seeing you guys as parents, you guys as students, and I'm looking forward to getting to reconnect with all of you guys on a more regular basis. And on that note, for this session, what I'm hoping to talk with you guys about is, I realize there's a number of holes that need to be filled. There are a number of things that over the course of the last year with COVID and distance learning and kind of really having to pare back a lot of what we've done in a normal year, you've missed out on a couple things, and not just a few, quite a bit. And it's been a pretty impactful year in a number of ways, both academically, social, emotionally, in our society. But as a junior, it's kind of a pivoting point for many of you guys. It's a time when you're starting to really kind of go on the downward slope of high school. Things get harder, but you start to work on how do we wrap up this 12 years, 13 years of education, and then move on to what's next for us. And so in this session, what I'm hoping to share with you guys are some general items, but also go into a few key things that we should be doing as juniors, depending on what your paths might look like. All right, so I want to make sure that we have that information, that we really take a minute and be able to look at that. You did, as juniors this year, unfortunately miss out on a pretty impactful year of pathways. And so it's unfortunate that that is the case. Junior year is a very robust and full year of pathways. A couple items that we typically cover in a year of pathways in junior year include things like working on some job-related skills, so working on resumes or online portfolios. It's also a big year for things like self-exploration and really beginning and diving into the idea of college and career planning. And so on this webinar, in this video, I want to take a few minutes and highlight the last two areas primarily today. And provide some steps that juniors may want to start taking right now as we, enter mid-spring and into the summer, and just go from there. We also missed out on a lot of your ILP meetings, which usually happen in 11th grade. I did meet with some of you guys, and I really valued our time together. I really love these types of meetings. It's really great getting to talk with kids and families about your goals and things like that. But I certainly did not get to meet with nearly as many of you as in a normal year. That's something that we would really make sure was a crucial piece of our meeting and really try to track down. But with COVID and this spring and everything and all the changes, we really had to pare back and kind of, make sure that school was the main focus and try to fill in the holes where we could. But unfortunately, it's tough to kind of make all those moving pieces all work together. Those meetings are still available. All right, it is not too late to hold those. My calendar will get a little bit busier as we reach the end of the school year, but a student can hop on and set up an appointment for their ILP meeting through the online calendaring system. We can take some of the things that you watch in this video to a more personal or deeper level. And we can talk, about your own personal goals and what you want to do in terms of your plans. And I also want to just recognize some or many of you may also feel lost or just unsure in the current state of things, whether that's in school or planning for life after high school or just in the world in general. And I just want to validate that that's feeling is okay. This is in a normal year, a process with a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties, and there's no right or wrong path necessarily for any of you guys to take. And so while this 2020-2021 school year has definitely thrown everybody for a loop, I also want to just revalidate that feeling of potential, like I don't know what to do, it is not that abnormal. Okay, and so we're hopefully we'll be able to do this. The biggest thing that we can really start focusing on is starting these things now. Okay, don't wait. Let's get going and let's start making these things happen. And so in this video, I hope I can provide some next steps for some of you, and also some clarity on what 11th graders should be doing now as they're going through the process. To get us started, I'm hoping to highlight a few general items that all juniors really need to focus on. It's something that's important for every student in this grade level. And then following some of that general information, I'll be breaking it down into sections. And if you're on YouTube, you can actually click in the description, there will be a timeline where you can click to the different areas that I'll highlight. And so if you're, for example, not interested in going to college right now, or that, I would encourage you, I think it would be good for everyone to watch the whole thing. But if that's not good for you, you can skip around to the stuff that's most interesting by clicking on the links in the index in the description of the video below. A couple things that I want you to consider as a junior, all right, is reminding you that keeping the main thing is probably the most important thing. And that's that your job is to learn, all right, and engage in the classes that you have now. A lot of times it can be very tempting to ignore the fact that we're currently engaging in learning and have opportunities to discover and explore within our current setting while we start thinking about what the future might hold or can look like. And that's something that can be a very tempting thing. And I think you could have the opportunity to miss out on a lot of revelations that are very important in that planning process to determine what path might look best for you after high school. All right. The other thing that I think is very important to note is most 10th and 11th graders really want to know specifics and want a concrete plan. And that's really, really hard to do in this time frame. Okay, and that's usually something that we want to set as a target. We would like to move from abstract and kind of like broader scale thinking to a more concrete plan. But that is something that we're going to be working towards in the fall of senior year and throughout senior year. It's a process. It's not there's not necessarily an end point per se. It just kind of changes. The target will change as you continue through high school and as you graduate high school and going to college, or whatever your path might look like after high school. And so it's something that I just want to make sure that you realize is that there's no right or wrong. All right. And it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, and maybe even frustrating for parents, in the sense that a lot of times we set up meetings and you want to come talk specifically about X, Y, or Z college, and then I kind of back us up and I say, whoa, let's kind of look at this from the bigger picture. And so I just want to make sure that we come from that lens. We really want to kind of like think from a broader perspective and really thinking about something that matters to us. Okay, as the student, as the future worker or college student or employee or whatever it might be, we can ask big, broad questions of ourselves. What is important? What makes us feel fulfilled? What grabs our attention or what shuts us down? What motivates us? All right. All of those types of questions help define what our fit. Okay, so that's a big buzzword, but it's an important one. It used to be kind of backwards, where we would see where do we fit with colleges and ignore everything about us. Finding about life after high school, whether it's a college or a career or a trade school or apprenticeship or military enlistment, all of those things are about finding fit in two key areas. One is what's going to be a good fit for me as a person? What's going to meet all of my goals, needs, wants, and desires? And we'll break that down here in a minute. But the other end of the equation, kind of like a good job interview, is the employer interviewing you. Do you have all the qualifications or requirements or skills or attributes that we're looking for in a hire? All right. So that would be, for example, in a college circumstance, they're going to be looking at essays potentially, or test scores, or GPA, or classes, or things like that. They're evaluating you, right? And that's one element of fit. And it's not to be ignored. You don't want to, we'll talk about diversity and applying diversity and looking across a lot of spectrums of information in the world of college in particular. But, that's one area, and you can't ignore it because you don't want to apply, you might want to, but you probably shouldn't apply to, say all schools that have a 4% acceptance rate or less. All right, so that's we'll talk more about that. But on the other side of fit is what matters to you. What makes you happy from an academic standpoint, from a social standpoint, from an environmental or political standpoint on campus. Those elements of fit are actually really important. All right, and so it's something that we really want to encourage you as a junior to start with. And I'll show you a couple of great resources where you can do that. But before we get there, I also just want to mention that here at North Tahoe High School, we do believe that all students should have the option to apply to college. I think sometimes that gets misconstrued that all students should go to college, and that's absolutely not true. College is a great fit for a lot of students. We think it's a great option and a great path to success and being able to reach goals that students may have set for themselves, but it's by no means the only path or the best path for any one student. All right, and so what we mean by having the option is that everyone is prepared and informed about what that looks like. All right, so everyone should have the option to do that if that's something that they wish to pursue. We also realize that plans change, where a ninth grader might say, I don't want to go to college, school sucks, I don't care about this. A lot of times in 11th, maybe 12th grade, they might change their mind. And so we want to make sure that they have as many options available as possible. And so sometimes that does mean us pushing students to say, take A through G courses earlier on. And, trying to encourage students to not shut doors. All right, but we realize also that college is not the right fit and that all students don't fit into a mold, right? And that is not necessarily the goal for every student. We want to encourage and provide opportunities for any student that wants to pursue any path. All right, and so whether that's working for a family business, attending a junior college or a trade school, or pursuing an apprenticeship, each path comes with its unique challenges and benefits. All right, so we're here to kind of make sure that you guys all are supported in that process. So throughout this video, we can't cover all the ins and outs of all the different paths. Okay, so we're going to kind of take a chunk of time for each individual path and go through some of those things. Okay, but much of what we talk about really has a lot of crossover between them. All right, so if you're not interested in four-year college, a lot of what we talk about four-year colleges will be applicable to junior college or a trade school or even the military or a job. All right, they're all pretty general skills. Like I said, we're starting broad. And so we want to make sure we're focusing on those things before we dive in and get specific towards the end of the summer and into your fall time frame most typically. One big thing that all seniors, but all juniors right now really should need to spend some time with and to mull over is working on completing these two forms that I believe that every single senior, again, you're a junior, but in the senior year, what we're getting ready for, you'll have the opportunity to fill out one of two forms. One is called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And that's a federal form, and that's probably what most of our North Tahoe High School students will complete. This form, the FAFSA, is for students that are U.S. citizens only. An important note is that the parent citizenship doesn't matter in this conversation. It's only about the student. So if a student is a U.S. citizen but a parent is not, that's not an issue, and a student will complete the FAFSA. For students that are not U.S. citizens, California actually has another document called the CADA, or the California Dream Act application, and it works very similarly to the FAFSA. We will talk more and much more about financial aid, how college costs are working, what are things that you can do, how do you get scholarships, what do you need to do to make college accessible? Because one of the biggest things that we notice is that many students can work through the application. We help them with things like helping get prepared, trying to make sure you're staying on and being competitive on a college application path at any level as part of our program. A lot of what students actually struggle with is kind of the end game of how do we make this affordable and accessible. All right, and so one of the biggest things that I would encourage every single senior to do, and that includes some support from parents and family, is completing this application. And we'll break down a little bit why, but I will promise you in our financial aid session, I'll break down it more. These things create accessibility to both need-based, meaning something that your family income or lack thereof will qualify you for. So need-based aid is to help you access based on your family's need and ability to pay for college, or merit-based aid, meaning stuff that you're doing that's cool or impressive or desirable to colleges or employers or other skill sets. They might offer money for those things. Many of these programs, definitely the need-based, but even merit-based programs, require information from one or both of these applications. All right, so the FAFSA or the California Dream Act. And they also create opportunities for things like California in-state tuition for our non-resident students, as well as access to Cal Grants, which are a huge chunk of free money for all of our California-based institutions, and a number of other programs in and around the state of California and even outside for students with the FAFSA. A big thing about getting ready for that now is making sure that you are filing your 2020 taxes. That will be the year that will be used on both of these forms. And so you want to make sure that you have those things completed and make sure that you keep a copy on hand for when you're going to need them starting in the fall. You're not actually doing any of these applications yet. You're just getting ready and just being aware. You will actually probably want to write down October 1st on your calendar. So October 1st, 2021 for, let's see, the class of 2022. Because that's the first day that the FAFSA and the DREAM Act actually open to start working on and submitting. You do not need to log on necessarily on October 1st and get it submitted by October 2nd. In California, you have a window of October 1st to March 2nd to actually work on, complete, and make sure that that's submitted. So it's a large window of time, but I would encourage you to make it a priority to try to get that done and submitted pretty early in that process. I would set a target date for all of our seniors of around Thanksgiving. All right, so that gives you a month and a half or so to complete that application, which in reality, it's a little bit confusing, mainly from the sense that it asks you some detailed questions that you have to pull maybe from your tax information. The information that's provided in the help is very good, but it's not hard. It can be confusing, but it's not difficult. If you have all your documents and you're able to kind of follow the directions relatively simply, it might take you 45 minutes to actually complete the entire process for the most part. But it's about getting it done. And one of the big areas that we see that students miss out on a lot of money is either not completing it all. And so the drop dead deadline for the year would be June the 30th. But in another case would be losing out on a lot of free pools of money by not completing it by March 2nd of your senior year. Okay. And I say that all students should plan on submitting this because one of the biggest things that we see students struggle with, like I said, is not necessarily the applications. They're difficult, they're challenging in some sense in terms of timing and stress and am I doing it right, and writing and creating opportunities and essay responses and that kind of stuff to help you get the opportunities. The biggest thing that actually gets in the way is people paying for the opportunities. And so here at Nortel High School, we typically have about 70% of students in senior classes submit a FAFSA. However, we'd like to see that improve much. I think that is something that we will have as a goal for the future years. I'd love to see 80-90% of our seniors complete that, if not 100, because I think it creates opportunities, and it's one of the biggest reasons not only why students are ready for college, but one of the reasons why they engage or enroll in college is by having the funding to do so. Most people will find that college is expensive, and this FAFSA and DREAM Act application is one of the biggest things that will create opportunities in that area. However, if you're not concerned about the cost of college, most economists who have any good sense would say and call it foolish to turn down potentially free money. And many, like I said, many of the merit-based, the stuff that you need to show, or private school and that kind of stuff may require information from the FAFSA to maybe provide you with some of those free financial supports. That means maybe you just don't have to pay quite as much for the college, even though you might potentially be able to. So in the next sections, I'm going to be breaking down a few things about some individual paths. And like I said, I would encourage anyone to listen to all of it. But if you want to skip ahead, down in the description, there are a couple of links that you'll find that I'll be breaking up the video into a few subsets where you can actually click ahead to find out, I want to go get a job or something like that, where I'll cover a few things. The first section will probably be the most content rich and have some carryover with the others below it. So I would encourage you to listen to that first section where I talk about some information if you're thinking about going to college. A good portion of our students do, or eventually do. And so I would encourage you to listen to it anyways, because it does have some good skills for you to be able to do anyways. So this section is for juniors that are thinking about going to college. When I say college, and I ask this to students often, and so when I say college, I often mean any type of education. For this section, I'm really focusing on 2-year, or junior college, junior college, community college, and 2-year colleges are all interchangeable terms for the same thing. Okay, so 2-year college or 4-year college, and college and university, just so you know, are pretty interchangeable. There's some minute differences, but for our sense and purposes, they're the same. All right. So the biggest thing that if you're thinking about going to college that you can work on preparing yourself for are focusing on thinking about what are your goals. Why do you want to go to college? Is it something that you actually want? And I don't say that to talk you out of it, but I want you to think about it. It's important. Is it something that others are expecting of you, but you're not expecting it of yourself, or it's not a goal for you? That's an important realization, and it's something to have conversations and think about if that is the case. If you're pretty sure that you want to go to college, why? Why wouldn't you want to go to college? Is there reasons why you wouldn't? All right. This is called thinking critically. This is called trying to think about both sides of the coin and making educated decisions about your future. It's not necessarily the goal to talk you out of going to or not going to college. The goal is to find out what are my reasons behind it, and is it a good investment of my time, energy, money, mental, and physical space? Okay, because sometimes you might have a goal that doesn't require college, and that might be the path that you have to investigate further. And so in this section, I do challenge you to really think critically about what you think about your future, what you think about yourself, what you think about your goals, okay, and really kind of take it from both sides of the lens. Another area that you want to think about is, do you have a specific target in mind? Do you have something that you're working towards? Is that something that you've already determined? How sure are you? Okay, and how much have you spent time researching that and maybe the fields that fall underneath maybe those particular career paths? Okay, because most people don't become a doctor, right? Most people are not just a doctor. They'd be a family practitioner. They'd be a surgeon. They would be a cardiologist or a urologist or something like that. And so they're specialized, right? So most people don't end up as an engineer. Most people don't end up as a doctor. They're a chemical engineer, an aerospace engineer. There's more specifics that you need to kind of determine about some of these paths. Okay, and then really just gauging how much you know and how sure are you of that process and what kind of helps and supports do you need. Okay, and that's where I really come into play is in this process, I rely on you in a lot of ways to ask for help, to be an advocate, because I'm not in your head. I'm not sure. I can't keep tabs on where you're at in the whole process. And so I rely on you to come and ask for help. We will be doing more than we have in this past year, in the future year, with regards to curricular components in classrooms and things like that. But it is very important, and you're still a huge component of seeking out the information that will help you be successful. I do want to show you here. I'm going to actually pull it up on my screen. I want to show you here some information that's available on our website. All right. And so this is the North High School website, and you'll find a lot of stuff that's available on there for a lot of different areas. For our purpose today, a lot of the information will probably live up underneath here, underneath the counseling support section. And you can see information here about academic, social, emotional, or like mental health counseling, some different resources that you have, as well as this area here. There's a whole bunch of stuff over here on these menus to the right of this page, but what I'm going to be focusing on is what's available here by simply clicking on the title. If you click on the title, it'll take you to the College and Career Counseling section of our website. And there's a few key resources that you'll find on this page. Okay. We still actually have the FAFSA demo. I will probably need to update that because they are making a few changes for the FAFSA coming up in the fall of 2021. But you'll see some links. And what I want to highlight here for our time right now in this junior year are these blue buttons up here. There are 8 buttons that really have some important items that you might want to spend time now as a junior exploring. All right. This first one is available to students only. Parents, if you click on this, you're going to get locked out. It's only available to TTUSD accounts. And I do that on purpose because I want students to take the charge in this process. This is basically a blank spreadsheet that you can make a copy of that basically think of it like a scavenger hunt. As you're researching colleges eventually down the road, you need to find some information out about them. This will help you categorize and search for some of this information on websites, on Naviance, on College Board, on different areas of kind of search tools that you can actually find, which you can click on down here to find out some of those great search tools. The other piece that I'm going to highlight is there's a fit kit here, but I'm actually going to have you go to this qualities of college fit. And I have it open up here. And when I click on it, what it's going to do is it takes you to this page, and there are 6 different resources on this page that are excellent for this time of year for juniors. Okay, as we go from broad to narrow thinking about what happens in college and life after high school. And so one thing that I would like you maybe even to work down on is there are some surveys and self-evaluations. For example, this first link is this self-survey. And what it does, again, it looks like a lot. Okay, but think about this. You're spending time now to make sure that you're investing your time wisely and your money wisely after you graduate. Do not treat this information like an assignment and gloss over it. Really take the time to dive in. A lot of the research that goes into planning for life after high school is not glamorous. It's usually not even all that much fun. It can be if you think about it in the sense that this is for my future, but it's thinking. It's really thinking and doing work. All right, but it's very, very important that you do it wisely and do it well. Okay, so take the time, really think about these things. Okay, but this will help you kind of identify what's going to be important. All right, and working through these, essentially the first 4 on this page are probably the most important. And you'll get down to one that talks about, let's see, where is it? It's this one here. This is the 20 colleges or 20 qualities of college fit, or that will make college right for you. All right. And so it goes through and it talks about some initial ones that are pretty basic, size, and it defines them. All right. And why you might want to consider different things about the different sizes. Okay. And it goes from that to anything about academic environment, probably political climate, all these different things that are essential to you finding a future home in a college of some type. All right. That again, all this applies to a 4-year university. This applies to junior colleges. This applies to trade schools. And so I want to encourage, this is the perfect thing for juniors to be working on right now in the spring of junior year and throughout the summer. By doing this, what this does, this helps you set a clear foundation for what you want when you start taking that abstract look at what your future looks like and trying to define qualities to it. What schools then, like I said, we students tend to do it research this way if they were left to their own devices. They often know of 4 or 5, maybe 6 different schools. Maybe they had siblings or family members go there. Maybe they see them in the news or in some sort of rankings. There's a link on there if you want to read about rankings and how really they should be viewed. But they get these schools in mind, pretty common schools for us in North Tahoe High School are places like UCSB and San Diego State. Beach schools are pretty popular among students. And it's a great place. A big thing just to remember, though, is you're not going to school to go to vacation, right? So, there are other things that matter about a school other than just the location. It is a big deal, but it's not something that you can base a decision on solely. And so what they end up doing is finding schools that they know of and then comparing all other schools to those that they are aware of, which basically you could end up with a list of schools that really looks good, but really it doesn't fit them very well at all. All right, so you want to start differently, and hopefully maybe some of those schools will end up on your list. Okay, but you're doing it from the right direction. All right, so that's a really great tool that I would encourage you to look at. All right, the other thing that you want to kind of pay close attention to in the world of college is the idea that you want to apply diversely and consider diverse options. And when I say diverse, I can mean that you can use that in any sense of the realm. You can use that to talk about diversity on campus. You can use that to talk about political diversity or ethnic diversity. In this context, we're talking about diversity of different options. All right. You want a diverse list of schools, both from admissions and financial aid options as well. And so that would that would be basically don't just putting all of your eggs in one basket. You don't want to generally apply to all private schools. You generally don't want to apply to all out-of-state schools because you only get one flavor of response, either from admissions or from financial aid or both. So you generally do want to apply pick a couple CSUs, pick a couple UCs, find a junior college or two to have on your list, either as a first choice or an alternate choice. Find some private or public out-of-state schools that you can consider as options. All those things, unless you're applying under some certain admissions types, which we're not covering today, we'll cover in the fall, you're not committing to anything by applying. And really what you're doing is you're trying to put your name into the basket, and by not putting all of your eggs into a single basket, you are ensuring that the results that you get back give you many different options to consider. All right, and this will help provide some admissions perspective as well as financial aid options down the road during senior year. Another thing to consider is most families and students will have no idea how much school will actually cost until mid-spring of their senior year. And that happens after you've applied and been admitted. Okay, we'll break down all the financial aid in the future this fall, but just be aware, like buying a car or house, sticker price is just that. There are a lot of factors that impact cost of college and what sources of support are available to you, and try not to let the high cost of, say, a private school totally steer you out of that realm. All right. If you apply diversely, and you may very well not, but you might find out at the end of the process that sometimes you see that private schools are actually cheaper sometimes than in-state public schools after all the aid is considered. And you also do things like look at the graduation rates, which we'll talk about in the fall too. That can make a big difference in terms of where students end up going. This can also apply to 2-year and 4-year colleges. Okay, another big thing that juniors need to do is, and think about, but it's less common now with the kind of most recent changes in the college landscape, is admissions testing, particularly for 4-year colleges. Right now, very few colleges require admissions tests like the SAT or the ACT. Most have gone either to a test blind standpoint, meaning they won't consider a score even if you have it, or a test optional standpoint, meaning that you can choose to submit a score if you have one or not, or choose not to take a test at all. Optional will probably be the most broadly available option for students at this point. And for general advice sake, every student will be a little bit different, so take this with a grain of salt. But generally speaking, if your family and your student are comfortable taking and attending the testing session, if you can get a seat, they are kind of a little bit challenging sometimes in certain testing windows and certain testing places to get a seat in a particular test, and you feel like you're a strong test taker, it generally won't hurt, minus potentially risk of exposure and that kind of stuff, to take a test. Generally, students who score in the middle of the road or lower compared to kind of their college averages that they're considering generally won't be a whole lot helped by submitting scores in an optional environment. You might not want to submit that middle of the road or lower test score because it could actually be a detrimental factor to the rest of your application that maybe is more glowing. If you do want to or you need to test, the spring of junior year is actually, and early into the fall of senior year is when you'd be aiming to do so. And the registration does happen directly with either of the testing agencies, the SAT or the ACT. And so you go straight to their website and book your registration on there. If you do qualify for any of our free and reduced lunch programs at school, you can qualify for fee waivers for the test because there is a cost involved, and you would just need to reach out to me to inquire about that, and I'll go over it with you. For junior college and 2-year college or community college, like I said, all meaning the same thing, they're also great options for students, and also an increasingly popular one at that. They can award anything from a certificate in the field, which is usually a few focused classes or skills, usually completed in a year or less, sometimes even in a semester, to an associate's degree, which is about 2 years of primarily focused major work with a few general ed courses tacked on, or a transfer path, which allows students to complete the 60 units of required undergraduate work that students will then take to a 4-year college and complete their last 2 years or so of upper division work to complete their 4-year bachelor's degree. It can, and it typically is, but it's not always a for sure thing. It can be a cost-saving route, but it does come with some risks, like any option really does. One of the biggest ones is your student does need to have a plan and be a strong self-advocate for what they need in their future. We will have a 2-year college-specific session in the fall where we'll go into much more depth about some of these things, but it's definitely something that students are increasingly making themselves available to, and a great option for many of our students. This next section is really thinking about juniors who are considering a trade, technical, or apprenticeship program. So a trade or technical school path can look pretty similar, but a little bit different to, say, the 2- and 4-year college paths. Usually there's much more variability in the terms of and timelines and requirements and that kind of stuff that you'll see with some of the other processes. It's not quite as uniform, but they usually include things like an application with some essential requirements that you may want to investigate early to make sure that you have all those things in place. Many will still involve costs, just like college would, and completing your FAFSA or your CATA applications, as well as any scholarships, can still help offset costs with these programs. And so it's definitely still valuable to do those, and will save you likely money if you do. Trade schools and technical schools are generally defined as a super focused program that teach all the essential skills and practices to enter a specific industry. Some common like trade and technical programs include, for example, culinary or pastry schools, or programs that teach that specific field. Auto or marine mechanic or technician, medical dental assisting, or similar healthcare fields like x-ray tech or phlebotomist, etc. Some of their main goals is that they get you in, out, and in your job, which is usually a pretty decently paying job, with a lot of availability. A lot of students and trades are really in short demand or high demand, for entry level and trained ready students. So it really has you in your job as soon as possible while making sure you have the skills that you couldn't just walk off the street with. An apprenticeship is very similar, but the learning is typically happening on the job versus, say, in a classroom. There might be some blended type of learning opportunities on an apprenticeship, but many times apprenticeships are also paid while you learn. So you're working alongside a master plumber or a master electrician or things like that. And they're learning while you're also getting paid to do your job. All right. And so it's a great opportunity, too, for students who really love those hands-on work, that are interested in fields along those lines. Many apprenticeships include often the construction trades. So that would be plumbing, welder, contractor, masoner, things like that. But you can also find them in different industries as well. And so every path, the apprenticeship path is usually a little bit less defined. There are usually like unions or programs that maybe states or counties have, but it's also something that you can potentially contact a contractor or someone that's looking for an apprentice and maybe get right in. This section is for students thinking about the military. So joining the military may be of interest for some of our juniors, and really now is another great time to start reaching out to a nearby recruiting office for maybe a branch that you're considering, to talk with about some of the specific steps you need to be aware of, as well as any of the requirements that they might need that you want to either complete or start working towards. So just a reminder that contacting a recruiter for information is not enlisting. You're not signing up for anything. You might get some mail, you might get some phone calls or follow-ups, but you're not signing up to go into the military. You can research your options without any type of commitment. All right. Just a reminder that you have the 5 branches to really consider. So you have the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, and the Coast Guard. But there's also the reserves that are associated with each of those branches. And so sometimes that might be another option to consider if you don't want to become a full-time military service member. You can also potentially join the the reserves and be a part of another support system that also has some great benefits. The military path does come with great benefits. A lot of times like tuition reimbursement and things like that. So not only getting things like education paid for, you also generally earn a paycheck, oftentimes have some interesting travel experiences. There are risks as well. Granted, you potentially might go into more unsafe environments, or you have less choice in some of the things that you might get to do. But you're also learning very transferable skills that you'll be able to bring with you into a college or work environment. Some things that people want to pay attention to include completing the ASVAB when it's offered next. The ASVAB is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's a test that all students that are considering the military will want to take, and that helps define what path you might take in the different branches. Continuing to focus on school, because that test is partly an academic test, and so your success in school can directly impact that exam. And most branches do require a diploma, and so it's important to stay in school. You also want to make sure that you're staying physically fit or get physically fit. Sometimes they require a physical fitness test. And then ask about any types of issues with health concerns, long-term mental health statuses too, medications, physical concerns, so like certain surgeries or injuries that might also, sometimes there might be some exclusionary factors with some of those. So those are good questions to ask in advance. And then this last section is for juniors thinking about going and joining the job force. If you're considering working right after high school, it's a very common path as well. And so, we do have employers that need dedicated workers both locally and around our country and our state. And you'll want to do a couple things in preparation for some of those things. All right. Consider what industry that you're wanting to potentially look at. And then try also to look for opportunities to develop or brush up the skills that you might want to bring with you into that field. Okay, for example, if you want to work in the food service industry and maybe be a server or something like that, perhaps you need, maybe taking a culinary class here or a nutrition class at the college might be a good plan. You also want to practice things like timeliness and organizational skills. Those are very important for any employer to see in an employee. You also want to kind of work and brush up on a resume. And that's one bummer that we did miss in Pathways, like I said before. Hopefully we can make sure that we get that in for you guys as seniors. But working on your resume, working on interview skills, and then also where to look for jobs locally or wherever you eventually want to live. Think about this long-term perspective too. Is this something that you want to do for just a short period of time, or is this something that you're planning on being in for a long time? Is it a career or a job? All right. And then what comes next? Is it something that you want to do this for the rest of your life? What happens next? Is there any room to grow in this field or industry? And will it support your lifestyle goals or needs? And then for students who are planning to work, I suggest also still completing that FAFSA or California Dream Act, because you never know what may happen or change. Sometimes working sounds really good, but after a term or so, you decide that you do want to go back to school. Maybe you didn't file a FAFSA, so the money is not there to help support that alternative plan. So by completing these FAFSA and California Dream Act applications, you do leave many of these doors open, and also then have some support and funding to help make sure that it can become a reality. So thank you for paying attention for some of this information that we've gone over for important stuff for juniors. We will have some additional stuff coming out. We'll do a little bit more focused session later in June, particularly about four-year college and stuff that maybe this summer might be a good opportunity to engage in for students pursuing that option. And we'll have a bunch of information come out in the fall. I just want to give you a preface that fall will become information overload from every single direction for seniors. We try to make it as straightforward as possible, but there's a lot of stuff that you need to know. All right, so I just want to give you that heads up. Get your brains ready, get your pens ready. Many of our sessions will probably be recorded or live recorded, kind of like this or another session. So it's something that we're probably going to make available to you digitally in the future. So you can fast forward, rewind, all that stuff. But I want to make sure that you keep those things in mind. Do your best to watch or attend these sessions, because the information is very valuable. If you have questions from any of these things, if you want to set up an ILP meeting, if you want to do any of the things that we've talked about throughout our session today, please reach out. Again, I depend on you to ask questions. I depend on you to work on being a self-advocate. Access to students in this day and age is tough. We only have you at school for a couple hours, and I do try to make sure that you are in class, because you've not had class like class is supposed to be had for quite a while. And so I want to make sure that we honor that you're in that time frame. But then you disappear and I can't get a hold of you. So please make sure you're checking your emails, read the stuff that we send out, watch these videos, because it will make your process and your life much easier. So thank you for paying attention. Have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you again later this spring.